The Cleveland Browns had a great 2020 season, as they had their first winning season since 2007 and made the playoffs for the first time since 2002. Not only that, but they would win a playoff game. This team has a really bright future, and in today's video, let's talk about this team and what they can do for success in the future and what's next for them. Before we do get started though, if you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure you hit that like button as it really helps out the channel. Also, subscribe if you guys are new so you do not miss out on any new videos. Plus, we're on the road to 500 subscribers, and once we hit our goal, I will do a Q&A plus a reaction to my first 2 videos ever. And the daily shout out goes to HK the Sports Fan. Make sure you guys go ahead and check him out. The link to his channel is in the description below. But with that being said, let's get this video started. And let's start out by talking about the Browns roster. And Baker Mayfield is the first player I want to talk about. And Baker Mayfield, he had a pretty good year, and he definitely should be Cleveland. He's going to be Cleveland's franchise quarterback for quite a while. As long as he's there, I'm sure he's going to be the franchise quarterback. This past year, he had 3,563 passing yards, 26 passing touchdowns, and completed 63% of his passes. Nick Chubb is the next player I want to talk about. Nick Chubb, he is one of the best running backs in the NFL, and is, in my opinion, maybe this team's best player. Definitely one of the best players on this team, and he is just flat out amazing. In 12 games, he had 1,067 rushing yards, 12 rushing touchdowns, and averaged 6 yards a carry. Kareem Hunt is the next player I want to talk about. And Kareem Hunt, he is a fantastic backup running back. I mean, on some teams, he could definitely be a starter. But this past year, he had 841 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, averaging 4 yards a carry. And through the air, he had 304 yards and 5 touchdowns. Up next, let's talk about Odell Beckham Jr. Now, he has not been awesome on the Browns. His time in Cleveland hasn't exactly gone the way we expected it to. And there is a chance that he is traded. Now, unfortunately, he hardly played this year. I still think he's a great player, but yeah, who knows if he's still with the team by the beginning of the 2021 season. Jarvis Landry is the next player I want to talk about. And Jarvis Landry, he had a really good year with the Browns, as he had 840 yards, receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, and caught 71% of his targets. Up next, let's talk about Rashard Higgins. Rashard Higgins had he is a very underrated wide receiver for this team. Baker Mayfield and Rashard Higgins have extremely good chemistry, and he's just a solid player. He had 599 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns, and caught 71% of his targets. Austin Hooper is the next player I want to talk about. And Austin Hooper, he did not exactly have the same type of production as he did last year, but then again, the Browns tight end core is pretty stacked. Obviously, he is one of the reasons why it's so stacked, but he had a pretty good year with 435 yards, 4 touchdowns, and he caught 66% of his targets. Up next, let's talk about Harrison Bryant. And Harrison Bryant had a pretty good rookie year, and he had 238 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, and caught 63% of his targets. Up next, let's talk about David Njoku. David Njoku, he's a pretty underrated and, solid tight end. And there is a chance he is traded, as the guy did request a trade, but, before the season did start. But he had a solid year with 213 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, and caught 65.5% of his targets. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, let's talk about Olivier Vernon. Olivier Vernon had a pretty good year for Cleveland. Now, he will be a free agent. We don't know if he's brought back or not, but he had 9 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 28 pressures this past year. Myles Garrett is the next player I want to talk about. And Myles Garrett, he is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. He is arguably this team's best player. He was flat out amazing this year with 12 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, and 32 pressures. Up next, let's talk about Terrence Mitchell. Terrence Mitchell had a pretty decent year for Cleveland, as while he did not grab any interceptions, he did have 13 passes defended. And to wrap up this roster, let's talk about Denzel Ward. And Denzel Ward, he played 12 games this year, but in those 12 games and when he was on the field, he was really productive for them, as he had 2 interceptions and 18 passes defended. Now, the Browns, they have a bright future, as I said before. They have a really good team. They have an extremely high-powered offense powered by a very good run game, plus they have a pretty decent receiving core. I mean, they have the best tight end trio probably in the NFL with Hooper, Njoku, and Bryant. Not only that, but they have one of the best coaches in the NFL, as Kevin Stefanski did win Coach of the Year, this past season. Now, they certainly do have their weaknesses, as their defense really was not good this year, even when they were healthy. I mean, they did have 2 starting defensive backs out the entire year, but then again, I mean, they still were not good when they were, when they were 100% healthy. But then again, the defense does have potential to be a pretty good unit. They probably should fire the defensive coordinator. At least I would probably do that, considering the fact that even when they were 100%, they still were not a good defensive unit. So, I mean, there's that for you. Now, before we do get started with the offseason moves in free agency and, the draft stuff, I want to briefly talk about Odell Beckham, the Odell Beckham trade rumors. Now, of course, as I alluded to earlier, Odell Beckham in Cleveland hasn't exactly worked out the way as many of us thought as many of us thought he would when the trade first went down. I mean, the guy, in 2019, he did hardly pass 1,000 yards, so he was decent that year, but it is clear that when he is on the field, the Browns offense doesn't perform as better. And when he's off the field, the Browns offense, I mean, it does perform better. So who knows if that's a coincidence or not. And there have been a lot of Odell Beckham trade rumors before, he had his season-ending injury. And they will have to make a decision in this year's offseason if they want to keep him. Obviously, the guy, his talent is undeniable. He is one of the best receivers in the NFL when he's healthy. But there is, at the same time, I mean, if your team is playing better without him, I mean, you can always consider trading him, and I can't completely blame them. And I mean, there's a chance that he might have played his last snap as a Cleveland Brown. And I don't know if the Browns will trade him or not, but if I'm Cleveland's GM, what would I do? I mean, personally, this might come as a shock, but I might actually trade him. Now, the offense does play better without him, and honestly, I mean, I can see why would you really keep him around if the team is kind of, performing better when he's not on the field. They can get pretty good value, in return. However, on the flip side, if they do trade him and they don't get a good, wide receiver 1 in return, that does kind of open up a hole, at the wide receiver position, as they don't really have a number 1 receiver, assuming, if they do trade Odell Beckham, assuming they trade Odell Beckham Jr., except they don't get a number 1 receiver in return. Jarvis Landry, I think he's really good, but I don't know that I would say he is necessarily a number 1, receiver. Now, they do also have like a really good tight end trio. I mean, who knows if it's a duo too. I mean, there's a chance that they also trade David Njoku. I mean, honestly, I can see why. You don't exactly need a great tight end trio, so yeah, I can see why. And I mean, who knows what they do with those two. But some trade partners for Odell Beckham could include the Patriots, the Dolphins, the Packers, the football team, and the Eagles. I mean, as a Patriots fan, I would really like Odell Beckham I think all of these options would be pretty good. And as for David Njoku, while he is the less exciting player, I think he's still a really productive player. He can be a really valuable contributor to a pretty good team. I mean, the Patriots, again, could be an option. So could, the Carolina Panthers. Maybe the Los Angeles Chargers if they do end up losing out on Hunter Henry. I mean, he would not be bad, at all. I do think that in 2018, when he was the number 1 tight end, he had a pretty good year. But yeah, those are some, other trade rumors, other like trade partners for, David Njoku. Now, getting to the free agency part, they could possibly trade for Stephon Gilmore, I will say that, and that would not exactly be terrible. But getting to the offseason moves, they will have, free agents, in Terrence Mitchell, Kendall Lamb, and Olivier Vernon. But luckily, they do have, $37 million in cap space. And their weaknesses really lie in linebacker, edge, cornerback, and safety position. So they will have to, address that. Oh no, they have $24 million in cap space, bruh. But if they were to trade Odell Beckham Jr. to the Patriots for Stephon Gilmore, they could have $37 million in cap space. But I mean, as I said before, they are free agents, but if they can get at least 2 of them back, that would not be too bad. I mean, if they can get like 1 to 2 of those guys back, that would not be bad at all. Now, I mean, they don't have to bring back all of them, but that's really what I have to say, for them. I mean, if they were to bring back, Rashard Higgins, I'm pretty sure he would like to stay, and probably Terrence Mitchell and like Olivier Vernon possibly. That would not be bad. But getting to the free agent targets, Leonard Williams, Adam Butler, and Dalvin Tomlinson would all be pretty good options, and so could Danico Autry and Melvin Ingram and Justin Houston. They would be pretty good options to help improve the pass rush, as outside of Myles Garrett and Olivier Vernon, they are not exactly great, and Justin Houston and Melvin Ingram could be pretty good in the event that Olivier Vernon does end up leaving. Bud Dupree, Kyle Van Noy, Hassan Reddick, and Leonard Floyd, I think they would be pretty good options at linebacker, as they are not that good at that position, and they could really help, improve the coverage on this team. Maybe they do also go after a guy like Lavonte David, who can, no, not coverage. I mean, if they were to get these guys, they could, improve the pass rush. And if they were to go after a Lavonte David guy, someone like Lavonte David, they could really improve the coverage there. And so, speaking of the cornerback position, I mean, someone like Mike Hilton or Xavier Rhodes or Troy Hill or William Jackson, they would be pretty good. Now, that the cornerbacks who play on the outside, they would be better if Terrence Mitchell does end up leaving, as, I mean, you definitely should get a good replacement if he does end up leaving. But if they if they can retain Mitchell, or if they were to trade for Stephon Gilmore, then I would probably let Terrence Mitchell walk and get a good slot corner like Troy Hill. But that's all I really have to say for the free agents. The Browns will also own the 26th pick in this year's draft, and some draft targets could include someone like Nick Bolton or Ifedi Melifonwu. Hopefully I said that right. Gregory Rousseau, if he's available. So could Joseph Osai or Trayvon Moehrig. And Zaven Collins could also be pretty good options. I mean, they should really focus on improving that defense. But to wrap up this video, the Browns got a really bright future ahead of them. If they can improve that defense, I have no doubt in my mind, this team will be contenders. But with that being said, that'll be the end of today's video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you hit that like button, as it really helps out the channel. Also, subscribe if you guys are new and enjoyed the content on here, so you do not miss out on any new videos. Plus, we're on the road to 500 subscribers, and once we hit our goal, I will do a Q&A and a reaction to my first 2 videos ever. Also, make sure you guys go ahead and check out HK the Sports Fan. The link to his channel is in the description below. But with that being said, I'm out, you guys.